Joe or John?
Do we have a new agenda?
The agenda is the same, but we're gonna
you're in
modify
Colorado.
it
No, that was, who was in Colorado?
before we
Oh,
approve
I
it.
thought it was you.
No,
Yeah, my part.
You need a wreath or anything? You getting a wreath through the scouts?
yeah, I'll buy a wreath if you put me down for one. That'd be awesome.
Just a regular wreath?
Yeah, whatever we did last year. Just the standard 16 or whatever it is. That would be
I'm
awesome.
assuming they're gonna be selling them at St. Michael's.
They are?
They usually buy some.
Oh, out in front, yeah.
Yeah.
But if your sons are getting a list together,
Okay.
put me down.
We got material for it.
Yeah, why don't you just bring it here, and I'll pass it down. Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Pick materials.
That I had is like what Jim was saying, this is a virus, the current established height, and then it's gonna be on the high side over there, so that's my only concern with this. So
Okay, you guys probably didn't know that the previous item has been pulled,
Say
so,
no problem.
so it'll make your evening much shorter.
No, I didn't eat dinner this time. The last one we were at, I didn't eat dinner until 9:45 or so.
So you'll have a chance.
Hopefully this one's
I
not
thought
as
you
bad.
might have some
Yeah.
support with the neighbors because they've only.
Not as long.
I don't even think I had that many
entryways
words
into
to last that long, but.
neighborhood as the next.
It is 6:02 on Thursday, the 13th of October, and I'm calling the Planning Commission meeting for the City of Oak Park Heights into order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, up next we have the approval of the agenda, and we do have one change, which is that item A, under the public hearings, we're going to remove, as we have, that application has been, correct me if I word this incorrectly, but rescinded.
Rejected.
Rejected.
Yep.
All right. All materials and fees have been returned to the applicant, and they'll come back later, it sounds like. So
I make a motion, we approve the agenda with the correction.
we have a motion.
Second.
2 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
And carries unanimously. All right. Next up, we have the approval of the September 8th, 2022 Planning Commission minutes. I wasn't there for that one, so I'll rely on the rest of y'all for any comments or edits.
Yep, I didn't see anything.
Nope, I don't either.
All right, with that, do we
Move
have
to
a
approve
motion?
the minutes.
We've got a motion and a second. I'll abstain, but all in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Carries.
Mr. Chair, you do not have to abstain from review of the minutes.
Well, I figured since I wasn't there.
You may, but for two reasons. One, yeah, there certainly there's video and all the other ways to review it, and so
Yeah.
you can always see it, but you don't have to.
Who made the second to that motion? I was just grabbing another Jen. Jen made the motion,
Yeah.
I made the motion to approve the
the minutes.
minutes, yeah.
And then who seconded? That's what I didn't.
Oh, either one
Yeah,
of
they
those.
was they were
Okay.
tied.
Motion, second.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, on to department, commission liaison, and other reports.
I guess I was a representative at city council last month. They approved the changes that were discussed. I don't know how far into detail we need to go with it, but our recommendation had been adjusted at that meeting, and they, yeah, granted their project with a change, so. And then Sadi's was approved as we suggested, so. That's all I can think of.
All right. Thank you. Anything from city staff?
One thing, Commissioner Husby I say that right?
Husby, yeah.
Husby, inquired about an item on the council agenda that will be discussed at a work session on by the council on October 25th, related to public speaking at a council meeting and potentially also at your commission. So I will email, he asked if the draft policy could be shared. So I will send that out to you tonight. Take a look through it. We'll find out what the council wants to do with it. It would be applicable not only to the council, but to the commission, ultimately the park board as well. So I think that is probably an important thing for them to talk about, and just setting up a parameter. Their goal at the end of the day, I think, is to try to have a reasonable berth for folks to engage. However, they do have to accomplish their business during those meetings in an efficient manner. So it's trying to find a balance. So I'll send that out to you.
Great, thank you. All right, next up, we have visitors and public comment. This is for any member of the audience to comment on anything that is not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. So I believe everyone in the audience is here for the public hearing. So no audience, we have no visitors or public comments, so we'll move on. All right, that gets us down to public hearings. So as we said, the first one on the agenda was removed, so that leaves item B, Valley Senior Services Alliance. Shall we begin with staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Kevin Laurie, representing Valley Senior Partners, Valley Senior Service Alliance, or Senior Housing Partners. Again, I don't know really what you call you anymore. I don't think you're Valley Senior Service anymore, more Senior Housing Partners. Anyway, there's a request for a plan unit development, general plan, conditional use permits for multiple family development and building height, preliminary and final plat, and architectural design guidelines site plan review. It's for that area north of 58th Street at Norwich Avenue North. The Planning Commission had looked at this previously as a concept plan for a three-phase development, and the City Council approved that at their August 23rd meeting. The general plan, now we've moved on from concept plan and we're into general plan, more detail. This is, again, the first phase of the development, the 79-unit multiple family apartment building that'll be constructed just north of that existing parking lot. You can see the small building, that's the tunnel entrance, and there's a parking lot there on the subject property. I'll go through quickly. The comprehensive plan, this is designated for residential business transition. It's always been envisioned because Valley Seniors or Prez Homes has owned this property for a long period of time, and it's gone through a number of the comprehensive plan phases, and again, it hasn't changed. The property has also been zoned as B4 limited business district. As such, the underlying base zoning district is B4 with a PUD overlay, but our ordinance is unique in that it states that the R3 multiple family district must be complied for when you have residential development in that B4 district. The height of the proposed building is 49 feet 3 inches, and then buildings over 3 stories and 35 feet require a conditional use permit. So that is one of the conditional use permits that we're looking at this evening. Subdivision, a final plat of Beltwell's Landing second edition has been presented. Just to, again, follow the subdivision ordinance, we'd also need to see a preliminary plat for that, and that should be provided as a condition of approval. Park dedication, as far as we can tell, I don't know if we have any new enlightenment on that, but it has not been paid, as well as the park dedication has not been paid, so we'll straighten that out and work out with the applicant in terms of those amounts as part of the development agreement. Project density open space, multiple family requirement is 2,500 square feet per unit. This is a market rate apartment building. It's not senior. So again, there's adequate space to accommodate this building as well as the subsequent phases. Setbacks, the R3 district requires a 30-foot front yard, 30-foot rear yard, and 20-foot side yard. We're short on the west side yard setback of 28 feet. There's additional 10 feet required with that 20-foot setback because the building is over 35 feet. So it's a 30-foot requirement in there at 28 feet. The adjacent neighbor is the Walmart. The plan unit development allows us to make those adjustments with setbacks. Staff does not see an issue with that, considering the neighbor is probably not going to be displeased by a 2-foot less setback in that area. Floor area, that's one of the items that we talked about when we reviewed the concept plan. We have an older standard of efficiency in one-bedroom units at 600 square feet. They do have what's referred to as some alcove units at 487 square feet. But that would comply with the elder requirement, at least 440, but this being a market rate apartment complex, we have that issue. It's interesting, I was just looking at a project in Excelsior, and for affordability purposes, they have roughly the same size units, about 480 square feet, proposed as part of that development. And I think that's a push with a lot of these developments to provide some smaller units that are less expensive, providing more affordable housing. So again, I think it's a plus. Kevin may want to comment on that, but I think you should discuss that. But again, we can adjust that again as part of the plan unit development. Street access, nothing's changed here. It's the same access that would be provided for that parking lot that's existing. And with the subsequent phases, access will be provided also at Norwich Avenue North. Plans are subject to review of the fire chief and the police chief. That's standard condition. City Arborist has provided a review of the landscaping. No major comments from the city engineer for the grading and drainage and utilities. It's also subject to Middle St. Croix Watershed Management Organization review and approval. Parking, again, in our quest to provide fewer parking spaces rather than more, the development would be slightly less, would provide slightly less parking than what our requirements would provide. Actually, staff has encouraged the developers to reduce the number of parking spaces, urban heat island mitigation, and just the fact that on so many of these items, we've tried to encourage less parking. There would be no underground parking with this development, but there should be adequate parking with what they proposed for the 79 units, plus the relatively small use of that parking lot for the employees, which is the reason that was originally put in place. In fact, we'll probably be discussing the urban heat island and parking space requirements more in the coming months. No issues with lighting. There's no signage plan presented at this time, but any sign plans would need to comply with the requirements and approval of city staff. If they need for some reason to come back for a conditional use permit, whatever, for signage, that would be dealt with at a later date. Building height, again, as I discussed, they need a requirement, or they need a conditional use permit to address that, taller building. Gone through the criteria for the multiple family. We do have design standards in the zoning ordinance, separate than our commercial design standards for multiple family, and we see no issues with the design. The design actually provides a lot of interest and variety and so forth, and meets those requirements well. Also review the other zoning ordinance requirements and do not see any major issues with this either. So there's a few points. If you look at page 12 of my staff report, there's, once we get to that point with the discussion aspect of this, there's some points that I think the Planning Commission should discuss based upon my comments and review of the planning report, and maybe some adjustments to those conditions that we see fit. So with that, any questions at this point?
Any questions for staff?
I think my only concerns that I could think of, and I wish Tim were here because he lives in that neighborhood, was the adding those 85 units and how much traffic that's gonna produce on, because I went through there this afternoon and holy moly, there was a lot of traffic back there. It's getting, because of how the service lane has changed, it's all that traffic's getting pushed back on that road back there, so I think that was one of my concerns. The height of the building was another concern, because I think Jim Kremer was at that one meeting saying that on that side of that road, that's a higher elevation. So it's already a high building, and then putting on a higher elevation if that's the case. And then, yeah, I think those were my concerns.
Yeah, the city engineer has provided a traffic review in his report. That's near the end of the packet. And, just the points that were made by this, the trip generation totals that they provided to us were correct for the 79 units. Traffic impact is minimal on 58th Street operations. And then a full traffic analysis should be required for all three phases of the development. So again, there was no red flags presented with this. But as we look at subsequent phases and the additional access provided at Norwich, as the engineer said, we'd probably need more of a traffic analysis at that point.
Okay.
Because once you put more development in that site, again, it's going to aggravate to a certain extent that traffic pattern. So we just need to be aware of that as we go down the road with this.
Considering the height question, is there a reference or a point that you could ballpark for how tall Boatwell's was or is? I know you mentioned it's going to be visibly lower, but just for the ordinance, is that a similar story?
Well, I have to go back in my mind as far as there were allowances made.
Multiples for.
Yeah, it's 4 stories, about what.
So it'd be the same 48, yeah.
So I was just going to say, I was trying to remember the exact height of what those previous buildings were, but there were allowances and conditional use permits given for the other Boutwell's
Yeah,
phases.
I'm just thinking with
and they're
the-
probably, I think the main building is probably even taller than what this one is being proposed at.
I just know that the main one that's right across the street is 4 stories.
Yeah. So
So in relationship to Walmart, I wonder how much taller it is going to be. Do we have any clue how tall Walmart is?
tall.
That's the building right behind
Walmart's probably 25 feet in height,
25.
probably.
it. So it's going to be slightly taller.
One story.
One story is going to see over
Building.
Walmart was what I was thinking. Because that's the
Yeah.
immediate building
Right.
approximate to it. So stuff across the street is kind of irrelevant. It's down the hill.
And then the only other thing I could think of that would come to my mind is if you're gonna limit parking, where's all that snow gonna go? Where are they gonna accumulate their snow and things like that? So,
Well, for now, they have a lot of open area that the snow can be piled. But again, I think we probably will have to look at that in more detail with the subsequent phases.
Okay.
Because as soon as they start filling that additional area up with buildings, parking lots, and so forth, it's more of a concern. At this point, I don't think it is.
okay.
Any other questions for staff before we ask the applicant to come up and speak? Nope, all right. So at this point in the hearing, in the process, we usually ask the applicant to come up and address the commission and answer any questions we might have.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Richards, for the review. I think that was well said. Thanks, Planning Commission, for taking the time to review our project and the opportunity to present in front of you tonight. My name is Kevin Laurie. I'm the applicant. I'm a development manager with Senior Housing Partners. Clarity, Senior Housing Partners is the real estate arm of Presbyterian Homes and Services, so kind of deal with all the kind of new developments, renovations, things of that sort. So, and then, yeah, it is these parcels of land are owned by Value Senior Services Alliance, which is essentially Presbyterian Homes. So
Okay, thank you.
there's that. I know it was confusing. for me
There's a
too,
lot of
so.
different organizations involved, and always has been in these developments.
Understood, yeah. And again, I think we're familiar with this. This is kind of a continuation of that concept plan that we went over a couple months ago. So I won't spend too much time going an overview, but just a reminder. I mean, we are a not-for-profit organization. We have over 7,000 employees. Primarily, we're in senior living. And again, just to kind of remind the impetus of why we're doing this, and a lot of it is for employee retention. It's to make our employees happier, more comfortable, and give them an affordable place to live. Having said that, this is open to other members of the community as well, but essentially, this is trying to, when we say workforce housing, that's kind of that affordable. It's not quite mid-market, but it's definitely not low income. It's kind of that, I don't want to say sweet spot, but 60 to 80% AMI, and so that's what we're looking to accommodate here for this project. So again, I think there's a lot of things that we're looking to approve today, but the impetus is that 79-unit building that we are proposing at the north end of the site. And so again, the future phases have not been planned at this time, so I don't have any further to add to that. As it is, we're just kind of focusing on that 79-unit workforce building. And again, the reason that we're bringing the concept plan and general plan in front of you as well to kind of encourage that we have been planning as well as we can for the management of these utilities, stormwater, all natural habitat and building layouts, just so in the future, if we want to do something, that we're already planned for it, ready to go, stub utilities where they need to, and just make sure everything kind of flows nicely. And so kind of moving on to that, again, I want to address some of the items that we're speaking about today. So first of all, so the height of the building. So as you mentioned, we are looking for that variance, not for the buildings over 35 feet, but this one's looking to be about 49 feet. And so we feel that this is consistent with Boutwell's Landing across the street, which is also a 4-story building. So just kind of the same eye level as that. And furthermore, there's a reason that we kind of place it on the north end of the site. The reason is we don't want to put this particular project on the south end, kind of have that blockage from the street. So really, we're just trying to put it back there. We did have a notch, and it kind of fits in. We already have trees planned to be lined there to separate them from Walmart. And so going to block off that view and try to make it a little more natural back there. So there's a reason that, we are looking for that variance, but we think we placed this location, this building appropriately to where it'll work out. So, and again, the parking, so we did address, and it's been, a balancing act with what Oak Park Heights looks to see, but then also kind of what's required in code, and then what works for the building itself. So we did, following the concept plan and our kind of general plan that we submitted, we did reduce the parking spaces by 10. There's a lot that goes into this because that parking lot already does accommodate parking spaces for some of the employees at Boutwell's. We've acknowledged that is, typically not full. We think it's about a third full, even at peak hours, and that's something that we've observed as well. And with this new building, we've done our own parking studies, and we find at peak hours, what we're looking at is 161 parking spaces now. So we did reduce that. While we did that as well, we did address the heat island effect that Oak Park Heights wanted to address. So we've got trees, more trees in there. We've got islands islands input in there. And we also have them in the kind of westernmost existing parking lot as well. So trying to address that as requested, and I think architects did a very good job. With regards to the alcove units, so I think this is a great discussion. I'm glad we brought it up. The reason that we have them at the size they are is because of, demand. First of all, these alcove units are maybe not what you typically think for studios. They're not just cramped. It's got a full kitchen, has full washer and dryer. It's technically, you would think of it as a 1-bed, 1-bath. It falls into the alcove category because there's not direct natural light, although we are considering possibly making that 7 feet hall to allow some natural light in there. So it is, a very livable unit. It's a comfortable unit. There are some, statistics that we've actually found with units. In the areas of Stillwater, Oak Park Heights, and Bayport alone, there's about 2.7% of the units available in that region are studios. That's kind of compared with the Twin Cities, it's about 7.6%. So there is a gap to kind of make up for that. So these units could be attractive. Another thing that we found, there's actually 0% vacancy rate on those studio units. So in this area, people are looking for them. You can do the math yourself, 0% vacancy. There's pent-up demand for it. So we think there's an opportunity for it for sure. We also did some forecasting. Younger households are more likely to rent this type of housing. It's kind of, again, it's not intended to be for a family of 4 by any means. It's, it's kind of that entry-level rental for, again, people in that kind of income level that we're looking to house. And in Washington County alone, people aged 35 to 44 are forecast to increase by 17%. And then millennials aged 25 to 34 are forecast to increase 7.1%. And Washington. So again, we think these are, you know, definitely going to be coming into use. You know, and that's to say, this next part is not any way an analytical thought at all. It's kind of my own thought. I think in society today, a lot of people have a lot more stuff, a lot more material stuff, but people are also downsizing very quickly. I mean, you think about entertainment, what are we going to do tonight? Probably go home, watch TV, look at our phone. There's, you know, people do need less, but some people like more. So there's kind of a little bit of a give and take with that. And then, yeah, I also, you know, I failed to mention that we do have also today another developer with Senior Housing Partners, Sam Jagodinsky. With BKV, our architects, we have Britta Carlson and Brian Scott. So I think with that said, I'll, you know, open up to questions. Anything you'd like to ask me about, I'd be happy to answer.
Do you have any idea what you're gonna rent those units out for?
Yeah, we do have some pricing packages put together, and again, this is kind of based off that 60 to 80% AMI. And when we're looking at 60 to 80% AMI, like a one person in Washington County, that's $44,000 a year, and then 80% is $58,000 a year. So that's kind of the range that we're looking at. So it's basically, you know, fit to, again, that's about 30% income for that. So.
Other questions for the applicant?
We'd originally talked when you brought this as the concept that we were looking at some of those units being allotted for your staff. Is that no longer the case? Is this going to be fully public building?
No, we'd still like to allot some of it for staff. That's something we have to work with the city on for sure. You know, because that is the idea of this project. This is, again, it's not market rate. This is supposed to be, you know, kind of, again, that lesser, about mid-market product. But no, we would like to see, it's kind of interesting. Again, we've never done this before where you'd like to allot it for a certain group of people. So I think that's something we're going to work with, and that's a work in progress.
Question about the parking, seeing your kind of phased approach to this. So the new extension of the parking will accommodate the current building only? When we're talking numbers of units, you know, we've got this proposed building on the south side, not sitting here and counting all the spots. Is that strictly expanded to support the new building on the north side only?
Correct. The parking expansion is just to support this new building. Not if that second portion comes, we'll be addressing that and adding more parking as needed.
Okay, yeah, because seeing that second phase, you have a separate lot, but then the people on the south side are stuck with no spots. Convenient spots, let's put it.
100%. And, you know, just to reiterate, we really don't have plans for that right now,
Yeah.
and we will address that if we come to that. But, yep, this is really just kind of focused on that first phase.
Because I'm thinking through the numbers, if you need, you had a lot of numbers in that portion of your conversation with spots. If you're saying 30% is used by staff, but then you need to have 150 plus 160 for the units themselves based on code. The people that, if you theoretically leave staff allowed to go under the tunnel and park there, people that live there won't have places to park.
Yeah, and so
Or vice versa.
Yeah, so we do kind of have a parking matrix that we do use, and that uses peak hours of when employees are working there. So we do have the advantage of knowing when the Boutwell's employees are coming in and out. So we find just by normal, if you look at a normal apartment building, how people are moving in and out, you know, usually in the morning and then coming back in the evening. We kind of compare that with there's going to be some flow. So there's going to be more people coming into park while they're working at Boutwell's, and then they'll be leaving, you know, for their shift at the evening. And then the residents will come and be parking there. So yeah, it's an interesting balancing act, but from our studies, we did find that it was sufficient.
So does the city have any concerns about like how much, I mean, you're putting 85 units in there, how much more pressure?
It's 79 units.
79 units.
Yeah.
How much more pressure there is in water and sewer and things like that? And I mean, I don't know if we're probably not to that point, but I'm just curious of how that's all figured with, you know.
Yeah, Eric, you may know more about this than I do, but I think our systems have been planned knowing that these areas that are undeveloped in this region would be developed at some point. I think maybe more of the open discussion is what happens with redevelopment of the King plant. I mean, that may put some pressure on us, but everything that's really vacant at this point can be accommodated with what
Fundamentally, it's 80 odd units in terms of, well, the city has firm water demand of, you know, million gallons a day. You know, pick a number, I'm not saying this exactly right, but we meet our firm demand parameter, and to Scott's point, with 80 units, a couple hundred units of single family or apartment complex on top of the hill where we're basically it largely will accommodate this. The city is really not in a position to expand outside of its borders and accommodate lands outside of its borders because we would exceed our firm demand. To Scott's point, down the hill at the King plant, we have a whole pressure reducing issue down there. From a sanitary standpoint, we're fine. The lift stations are adequately sized, and the applicants, when they apply for their building permits, they pay a SAC charge, and that goes to the Met Council, which then operates the wastewater treatment plant. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I
Good.
just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
can handle it. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
a lot of, that's all of a sudden putting a bunch
Yeah.
of people in a small area and then proposing on putting more people into a
Yeah.
smaller area, so.
From that perspective, should be fine.
Yeah, and I will add too, we have hired a fire suppression contractor to measure and do some flow tests to see, how the water does go to the site, if we'll need a pump, if not, so.
One final question, and this will probably go between Scott and the applicant, but the question about variety between, where is that? Appearance, colors, materials, and variety between buildings. Is that specific to this property and the expansion ideas, or what cohesion are we trying to validate?
I guess repeat that.
So in your point number 13, you're saying, comment on the building appearance, colors, materials, and variety between buildings. This is one structure. What are
Yeah.
we comparing against?
Yeah, good point. That may have been just a follow-up from previous Boutwell's approvals, but really, you're just really commenting on this one at this time because we're not looking at a design
Okay.
of the others, so I can reword that. We're okay on that, thank you.
Yeah, good. Any other questions for the applicant? I don't have any either, because they also asked all the good ones, so. With that, I think we're ready to open the public hearing. So I will open it at 6:32 PM, and we can continue our discussion. If there is discussion.
I think from the last time the applicant was here till now, the alcove thing was the point last time. I think they've got the right approach. The need is there. I don't have an issue with the size. Comparing to the Excelsior example that Scott gave, they're there, people will use them. They know what they're getting into. They have the budget to get there. That's maybe what they're only able to afford. I think it's reasonable. They've got a good game plan for that. I like the parking plan. That was another topic, but the city's conversations with Heat Island, they're ticking all the boxes in my opinion. I don't really have any issues with what they're talking about.
I would like to see some follow-up on what percentage of the units are going to be used for Boutwell versus what are going to be used for the public, because it is a public space that we're talking about adding housing to the community. So one of the benefits of the alcove units is that studio space, but if that studio space is going to be purely allotted for their usage, I think I'd like to have a little more understanding of that down the line as they build it out. Other than that, I'm comfortable with the designs and I really like the concept of the building. I just want to make sure that Oak Park Heights is going to be getting some of that space, or if it's going to go purely to Boutwell, that's fine as well. I just like to see that clarified.
Okay.
So Blake, to clarify, as we're looking at phases down the road. Okay.
Yep, as this continues down the path, because I think we need to have a good understanding of, is this Boutwell or is this Oak Park Heights? Because this is kind of this gray area of a building that we're building that's kind of new. And I think we're learning as we go.
Sure.
So if I could ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
So help me understand, is it the desire you have, or is the concept that you'd like to see 10%, I'm just throwing it out there, to be made available to, as a benchmark to their employees?
or vice versa to the community.
Okay, so, I mean, so,
Because is it going to be purely Botwell staffing facility, right? Is it for Botwell's Landing across the street? Or is it going to be a public?
which is your preference, just for the sake of discussion?
I don't have a preference either way.
Okay.
I just want to understand what the.
And the reason I ask,
Moving forward.
the reason I ask is in some development agreements the city has, for example, at the, Scott, at Tim Nolde's, the,
Oak Park Ponds, is it?
no,
That's a hot commercial.
Oak Green Villas or whatever, what's,
Something senior living.
Oak Park Senior Living, on all these names these folks have, right?
And they're all start with Oak Park Heights. or
Yeah.
Oak Park.
Yeah. So in that development, the city, there is a commitment between the parties, between the developer and the city, that limits occupancy to over 55. Maybe it's 50 in one of them, but the nuance there was a financing mechanism from a revenue bond, which was part of their commitments and their federal, I think some tax elements to that. I can't speak to all those things, but there is a requirement. They, at the city, embedded in the development agreement that says you can't violate this. So I'm just trying to analyze what you're saying is there something in your mind that says, would the developer, would the city want to put a condition in the developer's agreement that said X% shall be?
Available to the public. Yeah, and that's just the question I want to have addressed, be thought about as we
Sure.
move down this path, because do we want to have a, like what you explained with the 55 plus, do we want to say that you can only use 50% of it for your internal staff and we'd like the other 50% to be external? Whatever that number is.
Yeah, whatever the number,
I'm not
I don't
picking
know.
a number, I'm just being,
I'd have to talk to the applicant and see if that, Scott and staff, whatever you all
We'll
might.
have some discussions as part of the development agreement and see, again, we were looking for your input to what your thoughts are on that. So.
That's just where I was thinking. That's the only real tool the city would have to affix a percentage through that development agreement.
the other thing, and the applicant spoke to it today, is I think we talked about those alcove units not being for large groups of families, and we talked about controlling that at some point, so we don't have families of 4 moving in for extended periods of time. I don't know if there's anything that we can do in our power, and they're obviously aware of it from the applicant's perspective, but it's just something else to be aware of that we want to be cognizant of as we go down this path.
As, you know, again, this is new to you also, but as you're renting those units, you know, I'm a landlord also in downtown Minneapolis, but, you know, there's nothing in my contracts with them that say, you can't have a dog, but there's nothing that says you can't have 5 children in that 2-bedroom unit. So, you know, again, that's something maybe we can explore a little bit, but it's.
We can write something that says that.
Which is something to be aware of and think
Or
about.
do they do it, yeah,
Yeah.
it's referenced in the development agreement.
Right.
But is that something that's part of your rental agreements
Right.
for the alcove units that you say?
We want there to be adequate space and light and room for all individuals to be a good, and of course they want that too. So it's just, maybe it's just embedding some of that, you know, affirmative language somewhere.
Well, it'd be interesting to evaluate like how many people that work at Botwell's would consider living there. Is there like a survey that can happen to say, we benchmark 30%? And then is it really reasonable to uphold that same percentage to them? Probably not. Maybe
Right.
keep it 15% or like availability to X percent, but like we don't know how they run their business. It's kind of hard to dictate a
Yeah.
ballpark, but
And then how, the question then will be enforcement and if there's a broad guideline the council and the city would want to work towards, I think you just aim there, and I think you're going to get a natural percentage of people that work and want to live there. I mean, that's just, I think, going to be a natural function. I think you're gonna get all kinds of folks who will want to live there. It sounds like a great place, so.
I think the only other point on my mind was about the setback that Scott brought up early on is Walmart's not here. They obviously don't have a problem. Looking at the plat map, it's 2 feet if the people that want to look over Walmart choose to live on top, I mean, they're subject to living there and looking out that window, but the setback itself is a non-issue in my eyes. I think the statement of which side of the building is going to have to be amended, but, yeah, that's the only other thing we haven't talked about.
All right, any other comments for the public hearing? I believe we've addressed all of the things we were asked to address the five conditions, number 3, 4, 8, 12, and 13. That's the setback, the alcove units, parking, height, and general appearance. I think we've addressed all that. I would open or entertain a motion to close the public hearing if someone wanted to make that.
So moved.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Any further discussion before we have a motion?
Guess we kind of jumped the gun there, but it was going to get talked about anyway.
That's good.
I move to approve as recommended with the condition that item number 3 changes the setback direction from the east side to the west side.
All right.
Yes.
Got a motion on the table.
It's just written wrong on point number 3.
It is.
Yeah, it's backwards.
I had the same problem with another client, and my east and west got screwed up
I had to do
when I was
whenever
doing all
he
these
started
reports that
waffles
week.
today.
I was thinking it through in my head before I seconded it, so I'll second it now.
All right, we have a motion and a second now. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. All right, so as always, this will go before the city council on the 25th of October.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for coming tonight.
All right.
And this will go to the city council meeting on October 25th. Julie will inform you as far as the agenda and so forth.
All right, moving on, we have new business, which has nothing, old business, also nothing, and then informational. We've got 4 upcoming meetings, which are highlighted at the back of your packet. I won't reiterate those, but they're there for your review. Item B, we have our council representatives coming up. So the 25th.
So I'm going to be traveling the 25th.
Okay.
Someone trade with me again?
I think I can be there. I think I can be there.
I just have to be gone in Iowa that day. I get back.
I don't
the
need to know.
26th.
I can. You can go to Vegas if you want to.
Thank you. I have to be gone for work.
All right. We got one change, and I'm fine. I think I'm fine on the 22nd. I'll let you guys know if that changes or not. But with that,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if I could ask one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
So, and I failed to say this at the department reports, and Scott alluded to it. So the council took an action on Tuesday night related to the heat island issues. And so they would like the planning commission to engage that issue further. So I did email you their action from the other night, as well as the related documentation about what those are and potential options to consider. There's a report from the American Planning Association there. So what ultimately this stemmed from Councilmember Johnson and supported by the council to ask you folks to think about those policies and how might those interface with your ordinances. So Scott, would you think this would be an agenda item for the November meeting or December? What would you?
Yeah, we did get a application in from Siegfried, correct, for the November meeting? So we will be
For what? For who? Oh, yeah, for the.
for the Bell property.
Yes, so we will, you'll have so yeah, if that works.
Because that just came in. It's my understanding. I haven't seen anything on it yet, so.
Yep. So it's in your inbox. Take a look and.
Yeah, so I expect that we should introduce the topic at the November meeting. We may not have a ton of research done yet, but we'll see what we can do for that.
All right. Sounds like we'll start getting nerdy at the November meeting then.
I've had fun with those at chicken farms before because of so many miles of rooftops. They're fun to do.
Solar energy panels.
Move to adjourn.
We've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And it carries. Adjourned at 6:45.
What's